Luckily for my children, I do have a day job.
Okay. Okay, so I'm introducing Travis Whipple, and this is what it says.
This is what it says.
Yes, this is what it says. Travis Whipple enlisted in the Army Reserves before graduating high school. In September of 1991, the Iron Curtain came down. By June of 1993, Travis was serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the former Soviet Union of Kiev, Ukraine, where he witnessed firsthand the effects of communism. Upon his return, he transferred to the Utah Army National Guard, where he served an additional 9 years in military intelligence as a Russian interrogator. Shortly after graduating from Utah State University with a degree in computer science, he was deployed in the Operation Iraqi Freedom and lived several months in Saddam Hussein's palace complex, targeted during the effects of shock and awe. Well, after being in theater for nearly a year, Travis was medically discharged from the Army, ending his 11-year service. Travis has spent most of his professional career working for various military projects and aerospace contractors on projects ranging from the next generation satellite missile defense system to Navy network infrastructure and fleet readiness tools. Travis is a former founder and chairman of the Longmont, Colorado 912 Tea Party and served as a precinct committee person on several committees and a Boulder County, Colorado vice chairman for the Republican Party. Most recently, Travis has been active in his church, the Boy Scouts, Freedom First Society, attending NWLA, and teaching a community early American history and U.S. Constitution course, as well as a history and science for homeschoolers. But mostly he is a husband, father of 7, and a patriot.
I like hearing that. It makes me sound cooler than I think I am. All right. I need 2 volunteers with cell phones.
Do they have to have Safari?
No, you have to have a timer for me. All right, you can be one timer.
Yes.
You can be the other. Set yours for 60 seconds. Set yours for whatever it reads up there, time box 4 minutes. Every time you see that, reset. And if it beeps and you haven't seen another one, then I know I'm running over.
Oh, man. I volunteered for this. Okay.
60 seconds. I'm going to use you twice. All right. So I don't know if you noticed, but in that little bio that my son gave me, did it say history teacher? History professor? History anything? Nope. Everything you're going to see today, I had to learn on my own. But as a Tea Party chairman, I had the opportunity to get lots and lots of people smarter than me together to come teach me. So I'm just passing on some of their wisdom and then some of the things that I've learned along the way on my own. Have you already hit start?
Yep.
Let's see, which button do I need to push? Oh, there it is. Maybe. That button. All right. Pop quiz. You all love pop quizzes, right? Get out a piece of paper. Hurry up, hurry up. I'm about to tell her to push the button. You will have 60 seconds to... You will have 60 seconds to name the people on the board. All right, 82. Or should I just call you Herbie? What? You wanted to press the start button? Yep. Go.
2, 1. Martin Luther.
No, write it down.
Dang
I'm really testing my Key of Liberty students to see how well they pay attention.
It's been like years, okay?
How are we on time? We're done. Done. All right. Now I want you to set that aside for now. All right, when you think of history, usually we talk about a time block, right? We are going to study the American Revolution. Or we're going to study Christopher Columbus. Maybe we're going to look at ancient China, the period of antiquity, the Dark Ages. We look at blocks of time, right? Maybe we'll look into, get into military history. You might look into the Battle of the Bulge, or the Battle of Bunker Hill. Or you might look at a particular figure. We're going to study Patton. And what did Patton do? I have a problem with this. I like cause and effect. And so I went looking in history for cause and effect. Let me ask you this really quick. Where does American history start? Just blurt it out. 1600. 1600? Why?
Because that was when they came in from, that was after they were there from England.
All right, yes. Jamestown in Plymouth.
When Erickson landed on in Vinland.
When he landed in England?
Vinland.
Oh, Vinland. Okay. What year was that, approximately? What century? Can you at least give me a century? All right. What do you think?
It's relative depending on what you consider, because our inspiration for the Bill of Rights came from the Anglo-Saxons, and that was a really long time ago. So what do you mean by the beginning of American history? Because,
What do you mean by the beginning of American history?
well, like I said, it's relative. It depends on what exactly you're starting with.
I want to start with the beginning of American history. What do you think?
Columbus was in
1492 with Columbus?
I think it was when the signers signed the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, 1776.
I think it's, not everyone's going to agree with the answer, but in the Book of Mormon, when they came over to the Promised Land.
Okay, when Nephi came over, so 600 BC. When I teach my American history class, I kind of have a precursor. You know where I start with? I start with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where I start my American history from. And if you wanted to, you can even go back further than that. Everything is connected. So, for today, we're going to talk about 4 specific movements. If you recall, the very beginning, what was the title of my speech? Or my...
What were the founding fathers thinking?
What were they thinking? Have you ever considered, okay, how many here has listened to Chris Ann Hall? Handful of you? Chris Ann Hall gives a very excellent presentation on the heritage of our Constitution. She goes back to, as was presented, the Charters of Liberty, the Great Remonstrance, the Magna Carta, all these documents that lead up to the American Revolution. But what I didn't understand, what I couldn't figure out was why? What were they thinking? For 700 years, at the point of a sword, we got a new document of freedom, and then we got a monarchy. Something changed. What was it? I'm going to introduce to you a new tool that I hope you will learn and incorporate into what you do in life. So we're going to look at the Reformation, the birth of modern philosophy, the scientific revolution, and the First Great Awakening. Now, I only have a small amount of time. There is no way I can do these justice. I encourage you to go research these on your own. But we're going to hit them briefly. All right, the Protestant Reformation. Who knows the guy on top? Who is he? Why do we care about him?
Well,
He started Protestantism.
He wrote a big thing about why the church is terrible and why they shouldn't have the right to tax them.
Okay, his 99 Thesis.
He was a major factor in translating the Bible into the common language.
Which for him was German.
He started people getting to break away from the Catholic Church and found what they thought was a more holy religion.
All right. He started questioning the authority of the Catholic Church, right? Who knows who that guy is?
John Calvin.
What did he do?
He was a French theologian and a pastor, principal figure in development of Calvinism.
Your parents must be proud. They've taught him to at least read.
Finest in his class.
Who knows what Calvinism is?
It's like a religion, right?
Okay.
That's all I really know about it.
You had your hand up?
Well, I was just going to say it's a sect of Protestantism.
It's a sect of Protestantism. Was there a hand back there? So Calvinism it will lead to Protestantism. Martin Luther, of course, leads us to the Lutheran Church. From John Calvin, we will get the Puritans and later the Separatists. Now, do they have anything to do with American history? What?
Pilgrims.
Pilgrims. What are the Pilgrims?
The first successful settlers in North America.
One of the first. I mean, Jamestown got there first, but they were kind of struggling. The Spanish had been there for a while, but they were mostly military.
Yeah, it was the first like modern civilized people that wanted to like create like because like there was the Indians, which had obviously come way earlier, and they weren't civilized, so.
Right, Europeans, they brought technology, some scientific advancements to the New World. They were seeking what?
Religious freedom.
Religious freedom. Who knows who Tyndale was? William Tyndale, or John Wycliffe, and John Wycliffe.
William Tyndale, wasn't he one of the key people that helped translate the Bible into English?
He was the key person, yeah. He was martyred, killed as a heretic for translating the Bible into English. I actually discovered, little side note, one of my 12-time great-grandfathers worked with William Tyndale. When William Tyndale died, he had not yet published his Bible. My grandfather collected the manuscript and published it under a pseudonym because he didn't feel he didn't feel like he deserved any credit because William Tyndale had done the yeoman's work. But my grandfather, whom I'm proud of to learn this, compiled it and published it and got it out there. My grandfather is considered the first martyr under the reign of Queen Mary.
What was his name?
I have it in a book at home.
Coverdale?
Huh?
Not Coverdale.
No. Anyway, so the Protestant Revolution did a few things, or the Reformation did a few things. It started people thinking outside of the church's authority. There are a number of different wars that occurred, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, that set the stage for certain events. Protestants versus Catholics, the French versus the Habsburgs, things of that nature. But ultimately, it got the people thinking. Let me ask you this. Which is harder, to navigate your life under a government or to negotiate your own salvation?
Navigate a life under government.
Why do you say that?
Well, if you're negotiating your salvation with God, then I'm assuming that's what you're referring to. God, you can't negotiate with God. God is a just God. He'll give you the facts, and then that's your results. I'd rather try to navigate through the government that I might be able to influence.
So by negotiate, I mean God gives you commandments. You try and live them. You fail. You repent. You try and live them again. You try and work that out. You're trying to constantly work out your salvation. Is it easier for you to live your life day by day underneath government rules, or easier to live your life day by day seeking perfection?
Perfection.
You think it's easier to try and get perfection? Fair enough.
I mean, but you can contradict that with that God has openly acknowledged to us that we're not perfect and that we're never going to be. So trying to be perfect is pretty much pointless because God made us with the intention of letting us fumble through things and make mistakes.
One of my favorite scriptural stories is when Christ comes to a man who is asked to be healed. And instead of healing him, he goes, "Thy sins are forgiven thee." And the Pharisees and Sadducees go, "Oh, that's blasphemy." And Christ says, what's easier, to say thy sins are forgiven, or to heal a man who's been in bed his entire life? Let me ask you this. Which is easier, to forgive sin? I'm not talking about you just forgiving your neighbor for something they did. I'm talking about the atonement of Christ. To forgive sin or to heal somebody's ailments? Is easier?
Yeah.
Absolutely. What did Christ have to go through to forgive sin? He had to atone in the Garden of Gethsemane. But from the perspective of the Pharisees and Sadducees, saying, "I forgive you," and getting the man off, they totally missed the mark, by the way. They thought healing him, and Christ knew this. He said, "I'll heal him as well." And he got up and took his bed. So let me ask you again, which is easier, salvation or living under a government?
Living under the government, because it's the bare minimum. It's not going to require you to necessarily just be a nice person, right? But it just requires you to, for example, not murder someone. So it's just the bare minimum. It's easier to just live under these man's laws rather than follow the higher law of God.
Thank you. You had a comment?
Man's laws are inconsistent. I think government is always changing. I think it'd be far easier to live under man's laws.
Certainly if we had God's government, if Christ was here on the earth as our king, that would be easier. But from an eternal perspective, how much work went into saving you versus how much work goes into just simply protecting you day by day?
Well, Christ did a lot of work. All I have to do is do my best. We're not expected to be perfect in this life. We're expected to try hard. I still think it's easier. If you're talking about man-made religions, then yeah, that's no good.
I'm talking about the total sum of everything that goes into saving you versus the total sum of everything that goes into you just living day to day.
Total sum, yeah. Who can compare with what Christ did?
Right. So keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that. You had a comment.
I did. So it's easier to elect and institute a civil government that forces you, like a father, to do what you should do of your own accord, than it is to follow the two most important commands of Christ, that are to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, love your neighbor as yourself. Much easier to have someone force you to do that than it is to take it upon yourself to practice that. Because what government does, help welfare and education of the people.
Right. If it was so easy to love our neighbor, why would we need a military, right?
Right. Why would we need any government?
All right. So the Protestant Reformation began to question the authority of the Catholic Church over their salvation. And we'll come back to that in a minute. All right. Has anybody ever wondered what the heck the Salem witch trials were? Why were they there? Why are they even in history?
Because a lot of innocent women were killed because some people got superstitious.
Why? It only happened in one place, At one time, over a couple of years, it's a footnote at best in history, a chapter in some of your history books. Why do we care? I asked myself that question. I'm like, it is so odd to have this just sitting in there.
Because it was wrong.
Absolutely, but lots of things are wrong that we don't study. We don't look at. What I uncovered, to me, drives to the answer of what were they thinking. What you had was the Puritans coming over, the separatists coming over. They were a very outward ordinance-driven society. In fact, they believed in this thing called full communion. In order for me to be saved, we all have to work for salvation. We all have to be saved together as a community. If the community is weakened, my chance of salvation is weakened. So they really fought for the soul of their community. The problem is, by the late 1600s, people are moving out away from the city. Well, to be in full communion, you've got to be at church every week, right? You've got to hear the pastor speak. You've got to get that new information or that reassurance or something. Outward ordinance. You have to demonstrate to the community that you're in full communion. If you live 5 hours, a half a day outside of town, you may not get into church every week. And so they came up with this concept of a halfway communion so that they could be saved with us. But that put a rift between the city people and the county people. And within that rift grew suspicion. But what's interesting is those people on the outside didn't have access to their pastor, their preacher, their religious leader, like the people inside. They had to begin to work out their own salvation. They were taking the Protestant Reformation one step further. They were forced of necessity to figure out how to be religious and pious without the benefit of a community. The Salem witch trial is just kind of a circumstantial evidence, if you will. It's an indication that something was changing in America. Now, unfortunately, in this case, it proved to be quite tragic. But the outcome of this, we'll see, was quite profound. All right, going to talk about some founding fathers. When you think about founding fathers, who do you think of? Throw out names. George Washington.
Thomas Jefferson.
Benjamin Franklin. James Madison. Over here.
Sir Bacon.
John Hancock. Who are your favorites? Give me one that hasn't been mentioned. Come on.
I've got one. Oliver Wolcott.
Oliver
Jacob
Wolcott.
Broome.
John Jay. James Wilson. I want to introduce you to a new set of founding fathers. Sir Isaac Newton. Let me ask you this. Sir Isaac Newton, was he a theologian, a scientist, a philosopher, or a founding father? Scientist. And a founding father. I heard yes. Who said yes? Why did you say yes?
Because really, they're all three. He was all three.
He was. Do you know why Sir Isaac Newton developed calculus? He wanted to understand God, or nature and nature's God, better. And he did it in the only language he understood, mathematics. In fact, at one point he was trying to calculate when the second coming would come. He was a theologian.
Why is Rene Descartes on that list?
Rene Descartes is on that list. Well, let me ask you this. Was he a scientist, a theologian, a philosopher, or a founding father?
Scientist and a philosopher.
Scientist and a philosopher. How is he a scientist? Do you know what he gave us?
Not sure. I know more about his philosophy.
He gave us the Cartesian coordinate system. Sir Francis Bacon, we think of him as a scientist. He gave us the scientific method. But we're going to find that the scientific method inspired a lot more than just science. Galileo Galilei, he was under house arrest for heresy, for having the audacity of saying that the sun is in the center of our solar system. He was right. He was also a devout theologian. He wasn't going out to discredit God. He wanted to understand nature and nature's God. So this is your first tool, empiricism. Empiricism and reasoning. So let me ask you this. Stand up if you have at least one functioning sense. Taste, sight, sound.
Basically, if you're not a rock.
All right, so unfortunately we got a few people over here that are completely void of their senses. We got some adults in the back, that's not surprising. All right, sit down if you've never used it. If you've never used your at least one sense. Is that the trick? People who are sitting down can't hear me? So, you all have senses. Okay, now sit down if you are lacking in any kind of brain function.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Because we don't use all of our brains.
Are you brain dead? I suspected that. All right. Sit down. Sit down if you have never used logic to figure out a problem, to make a decision. Sit down if you've never used reason in an argument to figure out a path. These two things, okay, you can sit down now. These two things were revolutionary. Up until this point in history, you were told the earth is the center. You were discouraged from doing anything out of the ordinary. John Locke is considered the father of empiricism. He and Francis Bacon came up with this idea of the scientific method. What is the scientific method? Who can explain it to me really quick?
The mode on which you discover scientific truth.
How?
Through observation, creating tests to answer your questions, proving which ones are right and which ones are wrong.
All right, observations. What do you need to do observations? Senses. What do you need to put them into practice? To develop something out of those observations?
A brain and mind.
Your mind. You need reason. The reason René Descartes is up here is he's considered to be the father of, the first thinker to emphasize the use of reason to develop the natural sciences. Now, I'm not saying he was 100% correct in everything he did, but he introduced an idea. And that idea flowed from France, through England, through Scotland. It created this movement called the Scientific Revolution. Something changed between the early 1600s and the late 1800s. What did we get? We got calculus. We got principles of light. We got Isaac Newton's 3 laws. We got the steam engine. We were making massive improvements. Why? Because for the first time, it was okay to use your senses and your mind to discover God's universe. All right, I need some younger volunteers.
Wait, how young?
Let's say 11 and under. We'll start with that for now. Serena, you get to come up here. I need, let's say 10. 5 on this side, 5 on the other. I'd use the big kids, but I'm pretty sure there'd be broken arms, maiming, blood, gore. Okay, hurry, hurry. We got to move fast. All right, I've got 4. How old are you? Close enough. Okay, 12 and over, under. Okay, I need 2 of you to come to this side. We're going to play Red Rover. All right, I need 3 more. How old are you? 13. Okay, give me some 13-year-olds down here. 1 on one side, 1 on the other. Okay, you guys can come all the way over here. I gave you space. Hey, come over about right here. All right, 4 and 4, that'll work. You guys know how to play Red Rover? No? Okay, really complicated game. Pay attention. First thing I need you to do is grab hands. Boys against girls. Battle of the sexes, right here. Let's get ready to rumble. Okay. The next thing that's going to happen, pay attention, very complicated. We're going to let, gentlemen, we are going to let the ladies go first, right? Ladies, you're going to pick one of these dudes over here, and you're going to say, Red Rover, send that dude right over. If you know his name, even better. Now you are going to run as hard as you can. Not really, because I don't want you going through that brick wall. I don't want to have to pay for it. You are going to have to break through one of their hands. So you're going to have to choose which one to go through and break through. That's it. If you break through, you get to take one of them as a trophy and bring them to your team. But if you lose, they get to keep you as the spoils of war. All right. You all are not excluded from this. You guys are my scientists. You're my philosophers. You're my theologians. I want you to use every sense that you can other than taste. I don't want anybody up here licking anyone. If you've got ESP, heck, use that too. I want you to make observations. Observations about motion, acceleration, stopping ability. Anything you can, you're going to make observations. All right. Yes?
I have no idea what we're doing.
You have to say, okay, repeat after me really quickly. Red Rover. Red Rover. Red Rover. Send that dude right over. Okay, girls, on the count of 3, do you know who you're picking? No. Hurry and decide. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Red Rover.
The one with the green shirt.
The green dude right over. Oh, he did it. Okay, who are you taking? All right. You watched that, right? See it in instant replay. Whoa. Okay. Your turn. Who are you going to choose? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go. Which one? This one? Okay, Dudette in the bright pink. Oh, she did it! She did it, and she got him back. Did you see that strategy? She was thinking, I'm losing. Drop. Boom. All right. Round 2. Tied. Pick. 3, 2, 1, go.
One with the hat.
No, you gotta do this right. There are rules to the game.
Red Rover. Then
Ezra, come on down. You're the next contestant. I'll be captured by the girls. They got you. You're on their team. All right, girls up by 1. Boys, this is your chance to tie it up again. Who are you going to send over? Let's hear it. Go. This was the last one we're doing. 3, 2, 1, go.
Red Rover sends you, the girl in the striped pants right over.
Stripette, dudette, go. Oh, penalty. All right, you stay over there now. No, sorry, the ref called foul. You're over there. All right, at the end, girls team 4, boys team 4. Make your observations. Just throw them out. What?
They didn't brace her at the first time. They just let her run right through.
I think they were like afraid. I think they kind of just let go.
I want principles here.
Belly flopping works really well.
Why?
I observe and I hypothesize. Use real scientific terms. Come on here, kids.
But you cannot use any laws from Newton on to describe this.
Harrison.
When the first boy went and he broke through, he ran all the way through, he didn't stop. Some of them would like pause and then try to like push through their
All right, so there's something here about continuing through it.
Wow, it's like that's one of
You can't use those.
or something like
So something about running through that breaks the arms.
Find the weakest link.
All right. Apparently, some links are weaker than others. Other observation.
When they fell down on the arms, they break easier than running through.
Falling broke easier than running.
There's this thing called gravity. I don't know what it is.
But some of them were quicker at scrambling, but others, even though they felt like you said, they were gonna lose, they just kept trying, and then.
All right, so there was a persistence factor and a fear factor. Persistence and fear. All right, and a note on my spelling. I subscribe to the Mark Twain philosophy on spelling, so look it up. All right, thank you. You can sit down. What did you just do? What was that? It was a game. What did you say, Liberty? It was science. More than that. You used your senses. What do we call that? There's another word for it. I just taught it to you. Empiricism. You guys just demonstrated for me empiricism. If we took this a little bit further, we could actually use this, do some more experimentation, derive some theories, try it out again. What would that process be? The scientific method. And how do we come up with these theories? We use what? No, empiricism is what we use to collect data. We use our reason to come up with theories. Reason and empiricism. This is the tool these are the tools that I want you to learn today. And you'll see why.
We have another round with the older people. Afterwards.
All right. So, the Reformation, the birth of modern philosophy, and the scientific revolution landed in America. Now let me ask you this. Where was John Locke from? England. How about René Descartes? France. Sir Francis Bacon. Isaac Newton. Martin Luther. John Calvin. Switzerland. Were any of these people Americans? Were they even colonists? But somehow their message crossed the Atlantic and lands in America. And it does a phenomenal thing. This didn't happen in Europe. They had these people, but it did not happen in Europe. As a result of the events that gave us, not as a result of the Salem witch trials, as a result of the events that gave us the Salem witch trials, the people moving out of the cities, this idea of a half communion, piety in America started to decline. Did you know that there was religious persecution in America in the late 1600s? Mid 1600s? Do you know why Rhode Island was formed? They were Baptists, and the Puritans wanted nothing to do with them. So was America a place of free religion when it was first colonized? No, in fact, most colonies in their constitutions mandated a specific religion. We hadn't got there yet. We were seeking it. We hadn't got there yet. And America was becoming less pious. We needed to change. There were some gentlemen that recognized this. Who's heard of George Whitefield? What did he do? He was a pastor who traveled around America giving these firebrand sermons. The Anglican Church, even though they gave him a position in Great Britain, would not give him a pulpit to speak from. So he came to America and would speak in the fields. And he would have huge congregations come out. Because America was sensing we're not as religious as we need to be. Why did most of these people come over? For religious freedom, and yet we're losing it. So these gentlemen came over. John Edwards calls up his friend, gets him on his cell phone and say, "Hey, George, I need you to come help me. These people are getting kind of weak in their piety. We need to shake them up." He comes over, he preaches. His sermons were printed. Did you know that over 50%, it's thought that over 50% of the American population, the colonists, read George Whitefield's papers? It was giving them a sense of communion with each other. It didn't matter if you were a Protestant, a Calvinist, a Baptist, an Anglican. You went because you liked what you heard and you were part of a community. What community was that? You were part of the community in the colonies. You were different than Europe. They sensed it. So here's some ramifications of the First Great Awakening. First off, what's our identity?
American identity.
Christian. What's our identity? Has it been that long? Western civilization. Christianity.
And love for liberty.
A love for liberty. Where did we get that? Again, the Great Awakening did not take place in England. the politics of liberty. So let's circle back around. We decided, right, that it was easier to live under a government than it was than the total sum of figuring out our salvation, right? Which one's more important, though? Salvation. So if in the late mid-1500s, they determined that I don't need a pope for my salvation, if I don't need a specific pastor for my salvation, salvation is worked out between who? You and God. Now, these other organizations help. They teach you the right way to go. They give you the principles, the ordinances, the other things that you need to get there. But can anybody else other than Christ save you? No. It's a personal matter. So, if I don't need a religious authority for my salvation necessarily, and it's more important than my government, do I really need a king? What?
Absolutely not.
Why?
Because a king's not going to give you salvation. Obviously, because we just said only the person not person, but the only thing that can give you salvation is God. Like, just first thing on the table. And why would you need a king if you already know that God is the only one who's going to give you salvation?
Right, and where have we learned? Where does all power come from?
God.
Nature and nature's God. Right. It's external to the system. They were beginning to discover that. Why? Because there was a new way of thinking. What was it? Empiricism and reasoning. Who gave you those tools? Who gave you your senses? God. Who gave you your mind? And who gave you your spirit? So why do you need a king to tell you what to do? This is what I discovered when I went down this road. What were they thinking? What do you think? What were they thinking? They were thinking, we can do better than this. They were thinking, for the first time, they were thinking, they have a national consciousness. We are one body unique from Europe. We are one nation under God. A quote from Whitefield's sermon, which over 50% read. We have a personal relationship with God. So, if our religious organization does not agree with us, we have a right to rebel and find one that serves us. Well, if I can find a new religion to help me with my salvation, what about government? Is it fair to say that I can find a new government to help me there as well? They established the idea that the chain of authority comes from God. And this notion that state rule is a contract with the people. And what did we learn with religion? If we have a compact with our religious organization and they no longer serve our needs for spirituality, what was their thought? Find one that does. So if our state rule is a compact and they're not providing our needs, what do? We find a new one. So it also advanced the notion of covenant, first in relationship between parisher and church, the prior able to break away from the latter if they felt the covenant was broken. Then to link religion and politics in the colonies. Again, philosopher, theologian, or scientist. They were all three. It was one and the same. You know, we didn't actually separate those concepts until Scholars call it the Enlightenment period. I personally call it the unenlightenment period because we separated theology from science and philosophy. We separated theology from philosophy and science. We separated philosophy from science and theology. For the first time during the Enlightenment, we had things like geography, geology, physics. You weren't a philosopher, scientist, theologian. You're a physicist. You have no right quoting the Bible. That's the Enlightenment period.
It's not very enlightening.
Yeah, I agree. The idea of covenant would lead to social compact. The strongest social compact we have, the Declaration of Independence, and the establishment of America as a covenant nation. So we get to these men. Benjamin Franklin, not necessarily considered one of the strongest theologians among our founding fathers, had a great respect for George Whitefield. All of these men were exposed to the philosophies of the birth of modern philosophy, the Reformation, and the scientific revolution. They grew up in the First Great Awakening. They were subject to that mind change, which led them to believe and to have the audacity to proclaim governance. So let me ask you really quick. Only give me a couple of minutes because I think I'm running over. What should we learn from this? I personally believe that in here lies one of the secrets if we're ever going to get this country back. What do you think? Are you having a hard time using your senses, figuring out reason? Exercise empiricism. Exercise reason. What do you think? And you can tell me there's nothing we can learn from this.
There's lots of stuff we can learn.
So what's one?
To do your best and how to think outside the box.
Think outside the box.
Well, I think the first step is, what were they thinking? They were thinking first. I think all too often nowadays, we don't even think about our government. We don't think about where it came from, what it's become, what it is now, or maybe what it should be. So I think the first step is definitely thinking to begin with. And I think another thing, kind of what, was it Lauren Spivak was saying, that not everyone can have all the knowledge, as you just demonstrated. It wasn't just like, woohoo, George Washington founded America. It was all him. He was like everything we ever needed. It took time, and it took hundreds of different individuals, hundreds of thousands even, and all of their combined knowledge, their combined experience and work all built up eventually to the formation of our country.
So we heard today at lunch some stories about we're wasting our water. You now have a new tool. When somebody tells you we're wasting your water, what are your new tools that you can employ?
Reason and logic and how we have the same amount of water as we did when God made this world.
Right. You don't have to take anything on face value anymore.
Teach them the 6th grade scientific lesson that you learn in public school about how the water cycle works.
Again, let me ask, how many of you have senses? One or more. Stand up. All right. Sit down if you are incapable of using reason, logic. All right. Now sit down if you refuse to use these two new tools to change the world. All right. Last thing. Pull out a piece of paper. Don't look at your other one. I need my 60 seconds counter again. You're going to have 60 seconds. Name these people. Only this time you have a hint. Every single one of them, ish, were named in this presentation.
What? That's not.
Go. Oh.
Benjamin Franklin, Martin Luther, George Washington.
On the paper.
No, number 4 is Martin Luther.
How are we doing on time? All right, time.
No, wait,
That was 60 seconds, I'm sure of it. All right. Now, take both your first one and your second one. Oh, bonus question. You don't really get 60 seconds for this, I'm running over. Write down whose picture was not named in this presentation.
Do you really expect anyone to know this?
I'm pretty sure you had a lesson at the beginning about situational awareness. Write it down. All right. Here are your answers. Grade your own paper. Just take a second. You need to grade both your first and your second because your first one will be the tiebreaker. While you're looking at that, have I convinced you that every man up here is a founding father?
Yes.
So next time somebody says, name me out some founding fathers, are you limited to Washington, Jefferson, and Adams?
No. There's also James Madison and Alexander Hamilton.
And Sir Isaac Newton, and Martin Luther, and Christopher Columbus? All right. 18. Stand up if you've got, oh, and the bonus answer. Montesquieu was not mentioned in the presentation. All right, stand up if you got all 19 points on the second try.
Really? I didn't have time. I can't write. That wasn't 60 seconds.
18. 17. 16. 15. 14. 13. You got 13? You are our first junior Minuteman. 12. 12? Good job. And you got 12? Okay, we're PC free, right? So you're our next junior Minuteman. I'm using man in the general term. 12, go ahead and stay standing. Let's recognize these people. 12, 11. Did you get 11? 10. I had more expectations, higher expectations.
I know, me too.
Congratulations, you did great. All right.
I got 6.
That was 10, 9. How many did you get, Edson? Oh, that's right. I gave him the answers. He was my guinea pig. It's 9. So 2 more for 9. What? That's okay. You probably deserve a senior Minuteman anyway. All right. I have one more left. Let's see. 8, 7. You got 7? There it is. All right, to the rest of you, it looks like you have some studying to do. Oh.
Hey, like that's expensive. Be careful.
All right.
You didn't need junior
I also have
I just want to end on this note. During the Virginia Constitution Ratification Convention, Patrick Henry, who has been identified as an anti-federalist, he opposed the Constitution. He feared it was too strong of a federal government. He left us this warning. Now, keep in mind, as soon as it was ratified, he left and said, "This is my government. I'm going to support it." But this was his warning to us. Virtue will slumber. The wicked will continually be watching. Consequently, you will be undone. That's his warning to us today. You being here, you are standing up against that. You are not asleep. I pray you stay awake and you stay virtuous. Thank you.